right, great. So again, for the sake of the recording, my name is Jeff Robinson, the Executive Director of the Office of Assessment, and we're here to talk about our STAR Champion training for the fall. I'm going to start off with just some quick introductions here. There are a couple members of the assessment team who are joining, so I'm going to have them say hello. Nina.
Hi, everyone. Nina Fonseca from the assessment team. Nice to see everybody today. I'm going to pass it over to Faye.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Faye Vecchio from the assessment team. I'm passing it to Michelle.
Michelle actually isn't with us yet. She's in another meeting. But she will be joining us. I said I wasn't going to make you do it, Tim, but I am. So I might as well just say hi, Tim, if you want to just say hello.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tim McKenna. I'm Deputy Chief of Accountability, so I work with the assessment team. Welcome.
Thanks, Tim. We also have some PESO representatives on the call, and if you guys would like to say hello, I think it's always good if there's any new champions who haven't met you before. So PESO reps, if you are on, if you want to come off, say your name and also what networks you support, please. I see Sean, so you want me to start with you?
Yeah, of course. Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Sean Carr. I'm the PESO rep for Learning Networks 2 and 10.
Thanks. I see Zoe.
Morning, everybody. My name is Zoe Ehrenberg. I'm the PESO rep for Networks 5 and 6. I think I'll pass to Josh.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Josh Culbertson. I am the PESO representative for the Acceleration Network. And I can't...
Carrie's here.
Oh, Carrie's here.
Yeah.
Going to pass to Carrie.
All right. Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Carrie Cantor. I'm the director in the PESO office, and I support Learning Network 1 and the Innovation Network. And like Josh, I can't actually see anyone else who's really on here. So if anyone else from our team is on, feel free to come off.
Great. I also, and if any PESO reps, if you join, please feel to just interrupt and say hello. I also want to give a chance to introduce two of our colleagues from Renaissance. They might not be ready because it might be a surprise to them, but we have Greg Mellison. Greg, are you there?
I am. Good morning, everybody.
Thanks, Greg. And Priscilla Mendez.
Hi, everyone. Good morning.
Thanks. So Greg and Priscilla they're both assigned to our account and work closely with us on all things related to STAR. I mentioned, and you can see on the screen, if you have questions throughout the year, or if there's issues that you need help with, if you email starassessment@PhilSD, that goes to all of the assessment team, some PESO representatives who are designated to be responsive to that email, as well as Greg and Priscilla. So we have a lot of people available to receive those emails that you send, and hopefully can give you some answers quickly and provide some help for you if you need it as we go. We are continuing to put the slide deck link in the chat for those of you who just joined. Here are our goals for today. We want to make sure you have an understanding of your expectations for testing with STAR in the 23-24 school year. We want to help you know what changes are coming to the STAR platform and how some of the testing requirements have changed since last school year. We want to provide you with resources and answers to key questions to make sure that you are equipped to have a successful fall screening window. And we also want to outline some post-test next steps and expectations. Here's our agenda. We're going to start by talking about some resources that are important for you, go through the testing expectations, tell you about some updates to the product we want you to be aware of, take a couple minutes to go through a couple FAQs and some clarifications for some misunderstandings that have been expressed in the past that we just want to cover for you. We're going to talk about progress monitoring briefly and some goal setting guidance for you. And we'll finish up by talking about some training opportunities that are coming in the fall and wrap up with some surveys and some contact information. So that's what we'll cover today. So we have this list here of lots of resources available for you. I'm going to take a couple minutes to walk through each of these, not in great detail, but just so you know what they are and how we think you can use them. So the right up the top here, these are all going to be links to things in Google. And if you don't know how to star something in Google so you can find it easier in your, later in your star list, you can follow the stepper there that's linked right up for this. But we recommend that with these resources, you might want to star them so you can find them easily as we go throughout the year. So the first one is the assessment calendar. I'm not going to open that and walk through it. It's pretty straightforward. The assessment calendar goes through what are the assessments that are offered this year and when are they being offered. So if you haven't seen that yet, please definitely take a look, not just for STAR, but for any other tests that you might be responsible for. This new, the second one here, this assessment events and deliverables guide is new this year. And we are going to be sending it out to champions and test coordinators probably early next week. Just want to give you an overview of what this document is. The first tab of this is going to explain a little bit about how to use the document. But what we tried to do, this is a tab meant for test coordinators. For all of the different assessments this year, you can see access, biology, civics, and so forth. We tried to put some of the key events and deliverables that you as a test coordinator will have throughout the year and give you some idea of what time those are going to happen, the event itself, and any specific resources related to that specific task or event, and also who to contact if you need more help with it. This is our first time making it, and I want to just tell you it is a living document. We are probably going to be we will be adjusting things as we go along. A lot of the dates that we've put in here, we kind of were ambitious of nailing down some dates for things that are going to happen months and months from now, with our best guess of when they're going to happen. We reserve the right to change some of these if things are delayed or whatever, but we hope that this is going to be a useful tool for you to hopefully eliminate some surprises of things that are coming and about what time of year they might be coming. You'll notice there's also a tab for principals and assistant superintendents. Though we tried to also highlight what are some things that principals might need to know and do throughout the year related to the tests. If you want to see all the tasks for all three groups together, you can go to the master list and see it. Just want to let you know that if you are using this document, please don't sort. You should only have hopefully view access to it if we set it up properly, because we don't want you to sort it or change stuff around because it would impact for everybody. So what I do want you to do is to go to the file, download, and then I recommend to do it into Microsoft Excel. And then you're going to be able to put filters on or sort it or anything you want to do to manipulate it to make it more useful for you. But we definitely are eager to hear as we go through the year if you think this document is helpful and if you have suggestions for how we might be able to improve it as we go. We're excited to hopefully this be a good resource for you. We have also STAR resources for the field. So this is a Google folder. We have a STAR resource. We have resources for the field folder for all of the assessments that we manage. This is the one specific to STAR, and you can see all these different subfolders we have here. So this is a repository where we try to put everything related to STAR that we think might be useful to you. We will certainly add things throughout the year, but you can see the different categories. Anytime we send out emails or communications, we'll put them here in case you want to reference them later. Anytime we do professional developments, we'll put them here so you can find them and you can see various things here. One that I want to point out, we often get a question about the CBMs and where do you find them for the teachers to put out the different measures and if they have to print something if you're not doing it online. And those are in the CBM folder because that question comes up a lot. So this is the STAR resources for the field folder. We have guidelines for multilingual learners. This was designed by the multilingual office, the Office of Multilingual Curriculum and Programs. We certainly consulted with them on some of the specific nuances with the tests, but it's a very comprehensive document of if you have English learners, what are the expectations for which tests they'll take, when are there exemptions for them, and other things to consider. There's also sections for the dual language schools. So if you are one of the, I think we have 7 or 8 of those now, if you're one of those schools, there's additional guidance for you in this document. So please definitely, if you have English learners, take some time to look through this document to make sure you're clear on what the expectations are for them. We will highlight some of those in the presentation, but the guide itself is much more thorough. We have guidance for using STAR with students with disabilities. This document has not changed a ton, but there have been some tweaks to it. So you can go through and take a look if you have students with IEPs, 504s, things like that. You can see what guidance is, which types of disabilities would qualify for an exemption from STAR, and some different accommodations that are available as well. So that is something that you'll want to check out. We have a STAR FAQ. This has been something that we've been adding to over the last several years. As different questions keep coming up, we try to add them to this. And this is going to be a helpful resource for you. If you have a question and you are somebody who wants to try to find it yourself instead of just sending an email and waiting for us to reply, you can check the FAQ, and there's a good chance that we might have already answered it for you. We do add to this throughout the year as questions come up or topics. So definitely, again, a document we recommend that you star so you can find it easily and check in the future. But some key topics in here certainly around which CBM form to use. Some of the other references that I already talked about are linked here. About how long do they take? How do you get extended time? Things about audio. And you can see just various topics here. So another document that we hopefully think will be good for you to use. I mentioned the STAR PD repository already when we were looking at the resources for the field, where we're going to keep all the PDs that we're doing this year, but we also have links to PDs we've done previous years. So if you, and we're going to talk about a couple of them that we think will still be useful to you, but if you've been a champion before and you remember there were some topics that we shared in the past that were helpful to you, you can go back and look at the old slide decks or PDs. If you're a new STAR champion and you want to hear what we've presented on in the past, you can look at those as well. We know some of you are SBTLs or system principals, and you might have access to the Click dashboard. Some of you will not, but if you do have access to Click, and you have never used it before, this Click 101 asynchronous video tutorial is just a real quick introduction to Click and how you might be able to use it. So if you've never used it or you would like some additional guidance, you can go ahead and watch that video. We have a teacher guide to STAR reports. So this is super helpful to share with your teachers after you have students who start testing and you get some test results in and you're ready to start analyzing data. This document is designed, it's set up where there's what are the key questions that you might be asking about the data, about participation or about growth or things like that. So you can look to see, well, what's the question that you want to answer? And then when you click on that particular question, it will take you right to which STAR report will help you answer that question. And there's a little explanation of what the report includes as a sample of what the report looks like, and how to get there in the STAR system. It doesn't refer just to STAR. There are some other reports that exist in SchoolNet that have STAR data. So this will be helpful for not just Renaissance reports, but also reports that you would find in SchoolNet. So this is certainly something that we think will be helpful to you, but we absolutely want you to share this with your teachers as well, so they can use this throughout the year as they start to analyze their data. We have an assessment guide for parents. This is on the school district the website, specifically the Office of Assessments page. And you can see here we have a section for STAR, and there are different resources on this STAR page that are designed specifically for parents, including some things that are translated. And I'm not going to walk through it all here, but we'll touch on some parent information a little bit later in the presentation. But if we are always looking for you to be able to engage families with giving them information about STAR. When are the students taking it? Why are they taking it? What's some of the information that students will get? And also some of the information that parents can access. So if you haven't done so yet, we would love for you to think about a plan of how you're going to involve your parents with STAR testing and STAR data. And there are two resources here specific to the Renaissance website, a back to school resources website, which is going to give you just some, especially if you're a new champion and you want some help with, hey, I've never done STAR administration before. What are some things I should think about? you can spend some time on this page by Renaissance, and it'll walk you through some guidance specific to the STAR products that might be helpful to you. And there's also Smart Start on Renaissance U. As a STAR champion, you have access to Renaissance Renaissance University. And I'm not going to walk through it now, but there's some excellent resources. Again, really, it's good for new and veteran champions, but especially if you're new and you are a little unsure about how you're going to run your administration in STAR, or if you have a lot of new staff members and it's their first time administering STAR and you want to spend some time sharing some of the resources with them, that might be helpful. Take some time when you log into your Renaissance page, there'll be an icon called Renaissance U that you can click on. As long as we know that you are the STAR champion, and we have you as a STAR champion in our records, you should have access to Renaissance U. If we just learned you were the STAR champion today or yesterday, we might not have that access set up for you yet. But as we learn new STAR champions, we pass that information to Renaissance so they can set up and make a connection for you with Renaissance U, and so you can access those resources. All right, I've seen lots of stuff in the chat. I'm going to pause for a second and ask my team, is there anything I need to address? Any questions right now?
Yeah, there's two.
Great.
The first is someone asked about STAR champions who are not SBTLs. Do we have any information about them getting access to Click?
The information I have for you is that we cannot get you access to Click at this time. There are, and I'm sorry for that, there are access to Click works on a license basis. And the district has purchased a limited number of licenses. So they were able to give access to SBTLs last year, but at this point we don't have enough licenses to be able to give it to everyone. I'm sorry, but there are other people in your building who do have access to Click. Certainly, like as I mentioned, principals, assistant principals, for sure, SBTLs, and your PESO reps also definitely have access to Click, and they are always happy to come out to work with you on data and show you various things. So if you want to be able to access Click, I would try one of those ways. Other questions, Nina? Yep.
Yeah, somebody else pointed out, and thank you for pointing it out, that the parent guides that are in our resources for the field and on our website are actually showing last year's test dates. So I'll apologize to everybody, and I'm going to get on making sure those are updated soon. Thank you for the person who let us know.
Yes, thanks, and sorry about that. We had a lot of documents to update for the start of the school year, and I'm sorry we missed that one. So thanks for pointing that out to us. Very helpful. Always, we're not perfect, as you know. So if you see things that look wrong or you need to be improved, please just let us know, and we're always eager to fix that as quick as possible. Anything else at this point from the chat I need to address?
No, I can answer the others right in the chat, so we're good to continue on.
Thanks, Nina. Okay, so thanks for your patience as I walk through those resources. I spent some time because we have spent a lot of time developing these resources, and we think that they're very useful, or they could be very useful for you. So we wanted to make them not just links on the page, but actually show you a little bit about them to hopefully encourage you to use them. All right, so let's go through the expectations for testing this year. So hopefully you got the STAR memo that we sent out earlier in the week, and so a lot of this information might be repetitive, so apologize for that, but it can't hurt to hear it again. These are our STAR testing windows for the year. We only have 3 windows this year. We are not offering the optional winter 2 window that we've had in the past. So we have fall, winter, and spring. These windows are required, and all students are expected to participate in the STAR tests during these windows, with the exception of students who are called out specifically in the guidance for multilingual learners or the guidance for students with disabilities. Those 2 documents, as I referenced earlier, do explain which students are exempt from STAR tests. But other than that, all students are expected to participate in STAR. And it's very important that you are trying to get those students to participate in all 3 test windows. One of the great things about STAR is that it measures growth throughout the year. And by being, if you aren't testing in the fall, it really impacts the ability to look at growth for the whole year. If you're not testing in the spring, it impacts your ability to look at growth for the year. The winter test is super helpful for, it's enough before the PSSA and Keystone, so that you can still make sure that you are putting in intervention programs or adjusting instruction in enough time to hopefully impact learning for students that would matter for those tests. But you can see, also here that we not just growth, but these tests are designed to be a screener that's helping us identify students who are at risk at not making yearly progress in their education. So we want to be able to catch those students early, so you can put intervention programs in place and support them. So please, we know it's all challenging to test everybody and all these different tests, but we are really hopeful that you're going to be able to get a lot of participation in all three windows for these tests. All right, lots of stuff on this page here, so I'm not going to read all these words, but these are the expectations for STAR testing for grades K-2 in the fall. So we have CAT. So CAT, and let me pause for a second, and I should have said this a little earlier. We have an assumption, and this is possibly an incorrect assumption, that if you were designated as a STAR champion at your school, that you're not brand new to STAR, that you've used it before, and you've at least been a teacher who's administered it, and you know something about STAR. So we assume a certain level of knowledge from our champions, and we recognize that it's possible some of you were designated as a STAR champion at your school and you don't have any prior knowledge. If that's the case, you're going to really want to spend some time in those resources we shared earlier. And also, there's a STAR 101 and 102 deck we're going to talk about in a little bit. You're going to want to look at those as well. But let me go through the acronyms for a second in case you are brand new. So CAT stands for Computer Adaptive Test. And CBMs here stands for Curriculum-Based Measures. So the computer adaptive tests, there's STAR Early Literacy, there's STAR Reading, and STAR Math. Those are the three computer adaptive tests. And there's lots of different CBMs, and we're going to look at those in a couple slides. The CBMs are 1-minute probes that are, if you're familiar, if you were around when we were doing AIMSweb, they're very similar to the AIMSweb probes in terms of how they're designed. And both the CATs, the computer adaptive tests, and the CBMs are designed to be universal screeners that will help us identify students who are at risk of not meeting their yearly goals and give us some information that can help guide instruction. So hopefully now we have, I can move on with these abbreviations. You're going to see that abbreviation for CAT and CBM a lot throughout the presentation. Our expectation for kindergartners is that, and first grade and second grade, is that most of them are going to be taking the STAR Early Literacy Test. The STAR Early Literacy Test is for students who are not independent readers. Once students become independent readers, and we know that's not a definitive moment where they become an independent reader, we know that as a teacher, you're going to have to provide, your teachers are going to have use some professional judgment to determine when they think students are independent readers. But once they are at that point, we would recommend that they shift to STAR Reading and STAR Math CATs. The STAR Reading and STAR Math do require some ability to be able to read, so it's important that you are kind of looking at your students and determining when it's appropriate for them to move from STAR Early Literacy to STAR Reading and STAR Math. In addition to those computer adaptive tests, the kindergarten, first graders, and second graders also have CBMs that they need to participate in, and we list the specific CBMs for the fall that they need to, for the ELA and for the math. And you can see we have Spanish CBMs listed and Spanish CATs listed. These are required for students who are in dual language schools, and they would be optional for students who speak Spanish but are not in a dual language school. And more guidance is available in the guidance for multilingual learners that we talked about earlier. So this is for kindergarten, first grade, second grade. For grades 3 to 5 in the fall, once a student gets to 3rd grade, they have to take STAR reading and STAR math. It is required because the board has various goals, and those goals have certain leading indicators tied to them. So the board can track progress throughout the year towards the goals. And STAR is used as a leading indicator for goals that are tied to the 3rd graders and up. So once students get to 3rd grade, they have to take both STAR reading and STAR math. If you have students in 3rd grade or above who are not yet independent readers, they need to attempt the STAR reading and STAR math test. If they can't even make it past the practice questions, then they don't need to continue with those tests. And at that point, you can choose if you'd like to administer the STAR early literacy test to them so you can get some helpful information about what the students do know and can do. But they need to at least attempt the STAR reading and STAR math test once they hit 3rd grade. You can see, again, there's requirements for dual language students that they're doing both the English and the Spanish version of a STAR reading, and they can pick either the STAR math they can do in either language of their choice, the Spanish or the English. You can see the CBM requirements. Once we hit 3rd grade for ELA, is just passage oral reading, and there are CBMs for math for 3rd grade, but they stop after 3rd grade. For grades 6 through 12, for the fall, they're required to do STAR reading and STAR math computer adaptive tests. There are no CBMs specific for grades 6 through 12 that we require. You certainly can administer CBMs to students at those grades if it's appropriate, but for the most part, by the time they get to 6th grade, they've hopefully moved on and do not need the CBMs, which are testing foundational skills at that point. So those are the expectations for the fall. This is a chart that goes through the CBM requirements for the whole year. So we just talked about the fall ones, but we wanted to make sure you could see for K-2, what are the expectations for the CBMs for the entire year? If there's an X there, that means it's a required CBM for that grade and for that testing window. So you can see kindergarten students have 6 different CBMs they have to do. 1st graders have 7 and then 5, and 2nd graders have 5 each window. These are the CBM requirements for grades 3 to 5 for the whole year. And again, there are no CBMs for 5th grade math, 4th and 5th grade math. And I apologize, I should say 4th and 5th grade there, not just 5th grade. Sorry about that. These are the CBM requirements for grades K-2 for the full year for dual language schools. I'm not going to read it all there for you on the screen. It's pretty straightforward. This document that we're looking at are these charts. You can access through this CBM matrix, and you can see it in an Excel format instead of just looking at it on the screen if you want to reference that. I want to point out with the Spanish CBMs that there are not math CBMs available in Spanish. So students should take the math CBMs in English only. And norm data is available only for the CBMs that are shown here on the screen. For if there's an X, that means for that grade and that time of year there would be normed data. Pause for a second on norm data. STAR are norm reference tests, and I'm not going to get into a whole lot of detail on that, but if the test is normed for the particular grade, that means you're going to get certain information like percentile ranks and the benchmark levels like at or above, or intervention, things like that. If students are taking a CBM that wasn't normed for their grade or their time of year, they'll still get a correct per minute score, but they will not get the percentile rank and the benchmark level. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that in a second here. So these are how you would get to the Spanish CBM. So if you go to the record book, you can click on CBM Spanish and you can see the different ones available here. If you're familiar with the record book, this should be a familiar visual to you. When students take CBMs, whether they're in English or in Spanish, when they will get a score, the number that shows there is their correct per minute score. The color coding is going to the benchmark level. The Spanish CBMs only have 2 benchmarks, green for at or above and red for intervention. You can see the percentile rank. That's what PR stands for, percentile rank. The cut scores to get, and there's English CBMs have 3 levels, Spanish have 2. If you ever see a gray box for a CBM, that means that that was a test that was not normed. There is not norm data for that CBM for the student's grade level and the time of year they took it. This happens most frequently when you're progress monitoring. So you're going to have some students who you're going to identify that need intervention and progress monitoring, and they need it on skills that are below grade level. So it's still appropriate for you to give it to them, even if it's not normed for them, because you will still get information from the test that tells you what the student knows and can do. But if you see this gray box, what that means is you're not going to get a benchmark level because it's an off-grade test. But this green check mark here, if you see that pop up in a gray box, what that means is that student hit the at or above cut score that would be expected in the springtime for whatever the last grade that that test was normed for. So for instance, you can see here with this CBM, it's for grades K to 1. So if I had a second grader who was taking the CBM, it wasn't normed for second graders, but if I see this green check mark, it means they hit the cut score for a first grader, because that's the last grade it was available for what the first grader would be expected to know in the spring window. So it's basically, hey, that student has hit the expected performance for the off-grade test, and they would be ready to move on to the next CBM in the order of complexity, one that would be hopefully at their grade level. If that didn't make sense about norming, don't worry. When you start testing, if you have questions about that, you can reach out. We can spend some more time talking about your specific students and answering questions for that. We also hope to meet again with champions in early October after you have some test data, and we can spend some more time talking about reports and the data at that point. Okay, so a couple things here that we want to point out for you, and then I'll pause again for some questions here. So we spent a lot of time and we solicited a lot of feedback on the STAR testing windows. We engaged lots of principals, and we were talking to other school leaders and other program offices and people who work with teachers directly in the field to try to adjust the STAR windows to be most useful. So the windows this year are long. The fall window is the shortest. It's 5 weeks. It goes all of September into the beginning of October. But then the second window is the beginning of December till the first half of January, and the third window is 2 months, almost 2 months long. It goes through all of April and almost all of May. So we did that intentionally because we wanted to provide flexibility for schools. We wanted you to be able to minimize the overlap of STAR with other tests that you have to do. And that's really hard since it's a STAR is given K-12, there's different tests that different grade levels would take. So for instance, PSSA is going to happen in April, Keystones happen in May. We have a STAR window that goes from April to May. So you would be able to say, well, if our kids take PSSA, then we don't want to do STAR at the same time. So you'd be able to adjust when you give STAR so it's not happening at the same time. Same thing with Keystone. If Keystone's happening in May, you can adjust when you're giving STAR around it. So one, we wanted flexibility so it doesn't overlap with other, you can minimize the overlap with other tests. But two, we wanted also to give you a chance to be able to choose, like, when do you want the test data available? There are some schools like that winter window with winter break. Some schools want to do it before winter break so that they have data available for them. And when they come back from winter break, they can get right into data analysis. Some schools don't want to administer the test before break, that their students are maybe you find the students are more checked out right before break, or maybe at your school there's attendance challenges right then and you want to wait until they come back from break before you give it. Everybody's got different situations at their schools, so we wanted to be able to let you choose to some degree when you're going to have that test data available. And then the windows are also longer because we want to maximize participation. We want to give you as much time as possible to be able to do makeups for the students, and also have some flexibility with, do you want to administer the test to certain grade levels at one time and other grade levels at later in the window, things like that. So those are all positives about having the long windows, but some things that could be a concern with having windows this long, we do not want you to be testing during the entire window. We know with makeups that might happen, but we don't want you to be planning on using the entire window to be testing the whole entire time, because number one, you're going to lose too much instructional time, and we need to let's get these tests over, done with, analyze the results, get back to instruction. It can also complicate your data analysis and we're going to talk about that a little bit more on the next slide. Actually, no, I'll talk about it right now. So here's how it could complicate your data analysis. One way in particular, with the CBMs, the curriculum-based measures that are for those K-5 and ELA, K-3 in math. The way that the norms and the benchmark levels work with CBMs, they stay the same. The cut scores related to the benchmark level stay the same for the entire window. So if a student, let's say, and I'm just going to totally make up some numbers here, if the correct per minute that they need in order to get at or above is 16, and that is going to be 16 on the first day of the window, and it's going to be 16 on the last day of the window. And a student who got a 16 at the beginning would get at or above, and a student who got a 16 at the end of the window would also get at or above. Why is that important? Well, if you have a window that's 2 months long and you test some students at the beginning and some students towards the end, and they both get 16 at or above, but that student who tested at the end had 2 additional months of instruction compared to the students who tested in the beginning. So you want to be mindful that if you're doing data analysis related to CBMs, our recommendation is going to be that you're going to want to test CBMs in a shorter time span so that students in the same grade, at least in the same grade, are taking the CBMs around the same time. Otherwise, when you're analyzing your data, it's a little bit of an apples to oranges, because some students got a whole lot more instruction than other students, but the scores are going to be tied to the same benchmark levels. So that's definitely one way it could complicate data analysis. With the computer adaptive tests, the cut scores that are tied to the benchmark levels, they actually adjust during the window. That happens automatically by Renaissance. The scale score that the student gets that's tied to their performance level is always increasing every couple of days, every week or so. It's not a set number of days, but it's always adjusting so that it's expecting that, hey, the further you get in the school year, the more that you should know and be able to do. So in order to get to an at or above, it's going to require a higher score as you go throughout the year. So the data analysis that we just talked about with the CBMs isn't as much of a concern with the CATs if you're giving something at the beginning of the window versus the end of the window, but it could be with the CBMs. So we wanted to just alert that to you. Another reason why you wouldn't want to use the entire testing window is it could just increase testing fatigue. You could just be like, oh, we're always doing STAR. Even though the students themselves are only testing once, but it might be testing fatigue for your teachers. They might feel like, Jesus, we've been doing STAR for 2 months now. So something that you would want to consider in designing your testing windows is to look at strategically, when in these windows do we want to test? Because we don't want you to use the entire window in most cases. So please discuss with your school leadership team to create a schedule that's going to be best for your school and how you're set up, what staff you have available, how many students you have, and what your data needs are. And then specifically, we have some questions that we think are really important for you to consider with your leadership team on things to think through for when you're scheduling when STAR should be. When do you want to have the test data? Do you want it early? Do you want it a little bit later? I was talking like, do you want it before winter break? Do you want it after winter break? Do you want it before PSSA? Do you want it after PSSA? Do you need to have reading data and math data at the same time, or do you want to stagger when you're doing those tests? Do you want to have data for all the grades at the same time, or everybody who's in algebra, you want to have that at the same time? Do you want to have CAT data and CBM data at the same time? Who's administering the tests? Do you have a small group of staff who are going around and administering it to everybody, or are the classroom teachers doing it so you can do it faster because everybody's doing it at the same time? Where are students testing? Are you doing it in individual classrooms or a large common area or labs? These are things that would have restrictions on how many kids you could test at a time and how fast you could do testing. When is there other mandatory testing happening? Where do we want to minimize our overlap of testing? When do we want to have data before a certain other test so it can inform certain things? These are all sorts of questions you can consider. I already talked about this suggestion here of administering CBMs to students in the same grade as close to the same time as possible. For that whole reason, we talked about the cut scores stay the same for the entire window. The other thing we think suggestion for you is that you should create a plan to monitor participation during the window and make sure you've thought through how you're going to handle makeups. So we are not going to dictate to you when and how you within these windows you test. We want you to choose what's best for your school, but we want it to be intentional. So please meet with your leaders, think this through, and decide when are we going to administer it in a way that makes the most sense for your building. All right, let me pause here and see what questions we have before we go to the next section. So let's start with what's in the chat that hasn't been answered. Yep. Yeah,
we have a few. I pulled them to the side. I'm going to start with the ones that are relevant to the latest information, then go backward. The latest information you gave. How are progress monitoring windows affected by longer testing windows?
Great, good question. So in the past, we have suggested that you don't start progress monitoring until after the STAR screening window is over. And that is largely because of how we calculate participation rates in CLIC. We're looking for students who are testing during the window, and then how we do the performance. If a student has taken more than one test during the window, we take the higher score. So that's like if a student is doing STAR reading in English and Spanish, we would take the higher score, or if they do both early lit and reading, something like that. So if you start progress monitoring during the window, it could impact those numbers. But this year, with the longer windows, especially the second and third windows, we don't want to restrict you to, if you tested early in their window and you're ready to start progress monitoring when the window is still happening, you can do that. For a lot of you, if you think it through, right, you're not going to progress monitor right away after a student's tested. If you do STAR testing and you determine which students need intervention, well, you need to do some intervention before you actually then progress monitor them, right? So you would assume there's at least a week or two, or in some cases, their guidance is up to a month for the high schools with the CATs, especially a month of intervention before you would do progress monitoring, or again, at least 2 weeks. So there shouldn't be a lot of schools that have a lot of overlap of their progress monitoring with the windows, but it's possible some of you will, and that's okay. So if you start early in the screening window and you finish and you during intervention and you're ready to progress monitor and the window's still happening, you can do that. However, be mindful that the progress monitoring version of the computer adaptive tests will not be available until after the window is over. What's the difference? The computer adaptive test during the window is designed the same way as the computer adaptive test for progress monitoring, but the progress monitoring version is shorter. It has fewer items. Both of them are still valid in how they give scores and how they determine risk assessment for the students, and the information you get is going to be the same. It's just that the progress monitoring takes a little less time, because the idea is the progress monitoring you're doing more frequently, and we wanted this Renaissance system was designed to make it a little shorter for the students so it can be taking less time. So we cannot do some people progress monitoring, some people the full version. It's kind of all or nothing during that window. So does not mean that you can't start progress monitoring. That does not mean that you cannot start progress monitoring during the window, but be aware that the students are going to have the longer version until the screening window is over. I hope that answers that question. Nina, what's next?
Yeah, so this question is related. And so they asked, if we don't test for the entire testing window, then begin progress monitoring during the actual testing window, is that going to interfere with click data? I know you answered the question, but I'm not sure if you mentioned click. So if you wouldn't mind expounding on that part.
Yeah, it won't impact your participation because you wouldn't progress monitor a student who didn't screen. So a student has either participated or not. So if they've taken the test more than once in the window, we don't count them as participating twice. Once the student has participated, they've participated. That's like a yes/no indicator. So it won't affect participation. It can have an impact on your performance score if you have students who are scoring higher on the progress monitoring test than they did the first time around. But we're not real concerned by that. Again, I don't think there's going to be that many of you who are going to be getting to that much progress monitoring during the window. And most likely the students' scores aren't going to dramatically change after 2 weeks of intervention, the first time you're progress monitoring them. So it's possible that they might score a little higher on the progress monitoring version of the progress monitoring instance of the test. And click would take the higher of the two scores that happened during the window. So it could slightly impact your scores in terms of performance, but it's not something that we're concerned about. If when you get to that point and it becomes a question or concern for you, definitely reach out and we'll get there. But we don't want to worry about it too much because it might not even end up being an issue. We don't even know yet, but we don't expect it's going to be a big problem. Nina?
Yes, moving back a little bit. In 3 and below, as in 3rd grade and below, if students are emergent readers, is it best practice to administer the CBM that would be most appropriate? For example, just the letter recognition for the students instead of multiple measures in both reading and math? Did you get all of that? It was a longer question.
Yeah. So the expectation is that you're always going to be administering the CBMs that are required during the window based upon these charts that we looked at here. So you always are going to want to administer the ones that are required, but you can also administer additional ones if you have students who are who are definitely below grade level or below the expectations here. So for instance, if you have a 3rd grader, I think the question was about a 3rd grader emergent reader, you could see they're asked to give passage or oral reading and that's it. Well, if they're not an independent reader, they're going to struggle a little bit with passage or oral reading, and you might find that okay, you need to start dropping back to some of these other ELA measures and figuring out, all right, where is the student, where do we need to focus intervention? And that's totally appropriate. We would want you to do that, and we spell that out in the progress monitoring guidance, and we'll show you where that lives later in the deck. Still give the expected measure at the time, but you absolutely can give the additional measures as part of your, you can do it as part of the regular administration. You don't have to wait till progress monitoring if that's going to give you additional helpful information about the students. All right, Nina.
Yes, we said, so in 3rd and up, if they cannot make it past the practice questions, is it still considered participation? And we should not push them past the practice questions. That's a question.
Yep. Yes, in all cases where, well, let me be clear here. We want students to attempt the computer adaptive tests. If they cannot make it past the practice questions, we do not need you to force them to keep going. However, in Click, when it calculates participation, it is not yet set up to count a failed practice test as participating. This is a known issue that we've had for a few years. The Click developers are working on it. We actually just had, there was another round of discussion about it yesterday, and how they're getting much closer to being able to have the failed practice test be incorporated in the participation rules in Click. I don't know exactly when that's going to come yet. We are hoping it's going to take place during the fall window so we can have that accurate, but it's possible that it won't. So that does mean, and this is the same as we've had it for the last couple years, that your participation rates in Click will be a little lower if you have a lot of students who are not able to make it past the practice test. If this is a concern at your school because you have large numbers of students in a particular grade or area that can't pass the practice questions, then this would be something that you'd want to make sure that the leadership team is aware of, that the leadership team communicates to the assistant soup, so that when people are looking at your participation data, they understand, well, look, we had this number of students who couldn't make it past the practice test, so our participation rate is actually higher than what's showing in Click. We know that's not ideal. We're trying to solve it so the Click mirrors the exact expectations, but it's just not there yet. I'm going to pause on questions. I just want to be mindful of time, and we have some things to go through in the deck. If we finish earlier, I'm happy to go back and answer all of these. And any questions that we don't get to that were asked in chat, we will follow up with you after the presentation. But let me just make sure I can get through the other content. And hopefully we should definitely finish in time, and I can take some more questions at the end. All right, some product updates we want you to be aware of in the STAR system. STAR has increased the time limits for each item in the computer adaptive tests. So STAR's not specifically a timed test, but it kind of is in the sense that each of the items on the computer adaptive test, if a student hasn't answered it in a certain amount of time, it brings up a little clock timer and it's like, hey, your time's almost up on this item. And if they still haven't answered it, it'll move them on to the next question. And that is designed intentionally to keep the test moving along. We don't want these to be really long tests. If a student can't answer it in the allotted time, then they probably don't know the answer, or at least it's a skill that they don't know well enough to answer quickly. And that's information that's helpful that we want to know in the data and the results. However, Renaissance was doing some analysis of how much time it was taking students to answer questions, and they were noticing it was taking longer kind of consistently. So they said, hey, let's increase the lengths of these to give chances for students to give them a little bit more time to answer each question thoughtfully. So you'll see here that each item was increased by 1 minute. And take a look at this chart here. I'm not going to read all these numbers, but this is the standard time limit for items this year. And these are all reflect an additional 60 seconds from what they were last year. So last year in K-2, when they were taking early lit, they only had 90 seconds for each question. Now they have 150. So you can see, I'm not going to read through them all here, but that's the chart. So this is hopefully a good thing for the students, but what we need you to be mindful of is that this does mean that some students might take longer. The test administration might take a little longer. Not all of the students are going to take the full time for all of these, but some of them might. So if you know you have some students who take a little longer, be mindful that your administration of STAR might take a little longer this year for the computer adaptive tests for some students. So wanted to point out that change to you. A question might come up, so we want to answer it ahead of time. Well, hey, does increasing these time limits impact the norms and the validity of the assessments? And the Renaissance team and their data team has assured us that no, it will not, because the item time limits are based upon what the majority of students need in order to answer a question to keep that test moving along. But the norm data, right, what that's based on is not how long you're taking, but it's comparing how students actually answer the items. Which ones are they getting right? Which ones are they getting wrong? And that's what the norm data is based on. And that's not going to be impacted by the time. So the norms, the validity of these tests does not change by increasing these time limits. So if these extended time is still not enough, STAR still will have the option for extended time. and unlimited time as accommodations for students who need it, but hopefully we're going to decrease the number of students who need that accommodation by increasing the standard item lengths. Okay, another product change this year is related to the STAR student report. So the STAR student report isn't new. That's been out, and this is an example of what it looks like. Really helpful report that if you're not using, we're gonna encourage you to use. But it's designed to tell the student what was their score, what was their percentile rank, how's their growth. It could track their progress over the year. It shows their progress in tests throughout. What are some key areas, the different domains that they're doing well in, that they need improvement in. So that's a quick overview of the STAR student report. What's new this year is that students now can access the report themselves. So in the past, the only way that a student would get the student report is if a teacher or administrator went into the system and downloaded it for the student and gave it to the student. Students can now self-serve and get it themselves. This has been something that we've been asking for Renaissance to develop for a while, and they have been responsive and designed it so it can now be something that the students can do. So we have a stepper linked here that shows exactly how it is, but basically when a student's in the system, they're going to they're going to have this new link that says view my STAR report. They click on that, they pick the test they want to view it for, and they're going to be able to see the report. So we included this guidance in the memo, but I want to highlight it as well that students should know how they do on these tests. We had a focus group several months ago. We brought in several students from different schools, and we were just asking them questions about STAR. And one of the consistent themes that was coming up was students were saying, I don't know how we did on STAR. Nobody told us, and I can't get it myself. And we don't know how we did. We took this test, but we don't know how we did. So that was concerning for us for a couple of reasons. One, we want to make sure that schools are talking about STAR data with their students and sharing it. But certainly the ability for them to get the report themselves, make sure that, hey, they can get it themselves and then not have to wait on somebody else to provide the score for them. We really want students to know how they do on these tests so that understanding their performance can help them, connect to their learning goals. It can help them take ownership of their learning. We also had students who said when they found out what their scores were, they're like, oh, I would have taken it more seriously if I knew that somebody was actually looking at these scores. That was actually direct feedback that we got from students, that they were like, I didn't really take it seriously because nobody ever showed me the scores and nobody talked about it. So, we think that we want to encourage you to be using this report. You can see here we are expecting, this is not an optional thing. Teachers should be telling students their STAR scores. They should be reviewing scores with students. If you don't want to use the STAR student report, that's okay. You don't have to. You can use something else to give them the information. But there is an expectation that the teachers are going over STAR scores with their students. The STAR student report is probably not going to be super useful for kindergarten or first grade or second grade because they're not going to be able to read it and understand what's on there, most likely on their own. Starting around third grade, they will have some ability to interact with it, we think. And obviously, as the older they get, the more they can use this report independently and understand it. We also think that probably around third grade and up, the students can learn how to get the report themselves. It's not that hard for them to click one or two clicks to get it. So we know that all students are different. So what we want to encourage you that the STAR student report we think is a great tool that you can use to have a data conversation with your student. You decide which students you want to use it for. You decide how much you want to use the report or just highlight certain areas, how much you want the student to be independent in looking at it. That's really up to you. But we encourage you to use the report, and we absolutely want you to make sure you're reviewing STAR scores in some way with your students. Okay, so those are the two main changes to the product that have come. There are some other changes that we think are additions to the product that are coming later in the year, but we'll talk about them when we know more about when they're there. Is that Greg?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Can you just go back to the slide to show where the students click on? Yeah, right there.
Yeah, and right here we have a stepper that goes through all more details of how they would get there. But so you can look through that on your own. But yeah, the students when a student logs in into to the district and they link over to Renaissance to get in, right under where their icon is for their name, and there's going to be these words, view my star report. And then what they click after that, you can use this stepper for. Okay. Is that good, Greg?
Yep, thank you.
Great. Yep, thanks for highlighting that. Okay, so some clarifications, FAQs. You may notice there are 2 new CBMs that are available in the system this year: sight and high frequency words and encoding. The sight and high frequency words is going to be found here under Foundations of Literacy. It's going to appear in the record book right here. And encoding is going to be under the encoding and rapid naming category, and you can see where it's going to appear there. These are not required. So teachers are going to see them there. They do not have to administer them. And our recommendation is that you don't administer them. We have met with the district's early literacy team to look at these and to determine whether or not we think it's appropriate. Their expertise in this area is, we've deferred to them that with the way that we are wanting students, the way we want to teach students how to read, the way we are the whole science of reading, right? The idea here is that the sight and high frequency words and coding actually aren't really supporting the way that we want the instruction to happen with reading. So that's why we're not recommending them. If you really want to use these, I would encourage you to reach out to us and or the early literacy directors, and let's have a conversation about it. But our recommendation is that you don't use them, and we absolutely are not requiring them. But we wanted to point out that they're there, tell your teachers so they don't just see it and go, oh, I got to give that one too. And we don't want to waste time giving additional tests that we don't feel are going to be the most useful. We've talked about this in the past for veterans. I'm sorry you have to hear this again, but just every now and then we hear this feedback from the field that the computer adaptive tests they're not aligned to our district scope and sequence. And in a way that's true, but in a way it's not true. The computer adaptive tests in STAR are aligned to the Common Core, and our curriculum is aligned to the Common Core. So the tests are both the test and the curriculum are covering the same standards and the same content. And the computer adaptive tests were designed with a learning progression where STAR has mapped out for each grade and each subject using the Common Core curriculum, what is the progression of how students would learn with, what skills would they learn at what point in time based upon how the Common Core is designed for each grade and subject. So there is going to be alignment between what STAR is testing and what the curriculum is expecting people to teach. But it is possible that they're not going to be in lockstep every point of the way. So it is possible that you might give a STAR test to a student. You might get back a school report that talks about them not doing well in a particular skill that maybe you haven't covered yet in class. Your teachers haven't got to yet in the curriculum. It could happen every now and then, and that's okay. These tests are designed to be, they are adaptive tests, and the benefit of adaptive tests is it's going to adjust to the level of each individual student. So if they're doing well, it's going to get harder. If they're not doing well, it's going to get easier to hone in on where that student actually is. I would always encourage your teachers, if they're doing analysis and they're like, well, look, we haven't taught these skills yet. We didn't get to that point in our curriculum yet. Okay, well then know that if your students didn't do well in it, well, okay, great. You didn't teach yet. So of course they're not going to, do great in it. You would expect that after you've taught it, they'll do better in it. It's still useful information to know where they are. I would just encourage your teachers to focus on, well, what did we cover? What were the skills that we've taught so far, and how did our students do in those? So it's hopefully that gives a little bit of clarity that these tests are going to be useful no matter where, what time of year you're giving them. They are aligned to Common Core, so there should be a lot of consistency with what is in our curriculum. Okay. These come up real logistical questions. We get them all the time, so we want to hit them here. How does somebody in your building get access to school level data in STAR. So not just an individual class, but they can see all classes, all students. In order for somebody to have admin level access, they have to be designated by the principal as a digital learning coordinator in the RAD system. That's the role access delegation. If you don't know what that is, your principal does. The principal can give up to 5 people the digital learning coordinator role. That means they can have 5 people who would have school admin level access. That's in addition to the principal and assistant principal. We automatically give principals and assistant principals admin level access, and an additional 5 people can have that. You as the STAR champion should be one of those people. So if you don't, ask your principal to designate that to you, designate you as a digital learning coordinator in the RAD system. Then we have special ed and ESOL teachers. How do they get access? Teachers have to be rostered to a class in order for them to be able to see the data for that class. And they need to be an English class or a math class or homerooms we're pulling in for high school. We just high school, Greg? Just for homerooms, high school only? I can't remember now. Should know that off the top of my head.
Yeah, so we pull in for high school because some students may not be rostered to a math and or reading class. So we want to make sure that they have access to STAR. So seminar and homeroom are pulled in for high school students.
Perfect, thank you. So if you have one of these teachers who needs access to the class and the data, you have to roster them as a teacher to that class, and then they'll be able to see that information. We get this question all the time. How do I give extended time to students? Teachers do not have permission to turn on this accommodation. We want to have some level of control over, so you or any of the admin level users would have to turn on extended time for any students who need it. So I'm not going to walk through the steps, but this slide and this slide and this slide talk about how you give extended time to students. How do I share STAR student results with families? So we talked about that a little bit earlier, but there is a family report that exists in the system. It's very similar to the student report, but that is a report that you can use and share. We looked earlier how there's information on the assessment website for parents. We have a slide deck here that is all about how do you do, what are the reports and resources that are available for families. So definitely, if you haven't seen this, walk through this. It shows you what's in the family report. It gives you some explanation of what it is, so you can help parents understand what some of these scores mean. And we also highlight where they can get additional resources, things like that. So for parent engagement, for family engagement, please use that deck and the resources we have there. We are working on a way that we can get a parent report that is for CBMs, not just for the CATs. And we're also working on a way that these reports can be available in the parent portal that the district has. So any parents who are signed up in the parent portal, at some point this year, we'll let you know when it's there. Obviously, they're going to be able to access STAR reports directly in the parent portal as well. In the meantime, they would be relying upon you to print it out or share it with them or email it home until we can make it so they can get it themselves. Okay, progress monitoring guidance. I'm going to be real high level with progress monitoring. I'm not going to walk through the whole document. We want to let you know that for students who do CBMs, you have to progress monitor with the CBMs for those students. You need to use STAR CBMs for progress monitoring. That's K-5 reading, K-3 math. Once the students are in 6 to 12 reading or 4 to 12 math, if you are using online adaptive programs and you would prefer to progress monitor with those, you can choose to do either progress monitoring with the adaptive program, the online adaptive program that you're using, like iReady or Achieve, or you can still progress monitor with STAR, either or, once you're at the 6 through 12 reading or 4 to 12 math. We have a guidance document here that walks through, if you're progress monitoring with STAR, everything you need to know about it. what are the goals you should set, what's the timing, which measures should you be using for progress monitoring. So we are not going to walk through this today, but it is very comprehensive. So if you are going to be using STAR for progress monitoring and those upper grades, definitely look through it. And obviously for the lower grades, you have to. So be familiar with this document. Want to let you know this slide here is new. This is about guidance for if you're using one of the online adaptive programs to do progress monitoring. This is guidance that came from the MTSS team in the district. So you can read through how some of the guidance they wanted you to know about progress monitoring with online adaptives. The assessment team and the PESO team do not we do not manage the online adaptives. If you have questions about the online adaptive programs, please reach out to this email address, mtssacademics@philsd.org. Okay. Goal setting. We are going to touch on goal setting now, and later in the month we're gonna be expand on it for you. The goal setting is really hasn't changed for previous years. Last year we did change and say, hey, you should be setting goals based upon the scale scored unified option that's existing here. That is going to continue to be true this year. We don't want you to choose the SPM here. We want you to choose the scale scored unified. You're still going to be using I said SPM, I meant SGP, excuse me. We're still going to be using SGP to set the level of the goal, but choose the scale scored unified and then pick their the level here. Want to stress this for you. Students, we found by looking at the data that students who are in the intensive intervention category in the CATS, they typically need high growth in order to move into the strategic intervention category, which isn't a real, that makes a lot of sense, right? If they're at the lowest level, they're going to need to be ambitious in their growth in order to catch up. So for students who are in intensive intervention, we recommend that you use the moderately ambitious SGP goal. If you have, for the vast majority of students who aren't in those levels, a moderate goal of the 50 SGP should be appropriate. You can always use the ambitious one if you want, the moderately ambitious one, but definitely for the kids in intensive intervention, that's the one we recommend, the 65 SGP. This is the same as well for CBMs. If you have students who are in intervention on the CBM, and if you use a moderate goal, and it tells you that the student is, if they hit that goal, is still going to be in the intervention category and they're not going to move to the on watch, then we'd recommend you pick the ambitious. If the moderate goal is going to move them out of intervention, then great, stick with the moderate. But if moderate's not going to move them out of intervention, we recommend go with the ambitious. We are going to provide more detailed guidance for teachers who are using STAR for their SPM goals, their student performance measures. And there is some specific way that you need to set goals to have SMART goals if you're doing it for your if you're using STAR for SPM. The PESO team is going to be running an optional PD that's available on September 29th. And the focus of that's one of the foci of that session is going to be on SPM goal setting with STAR. And once we will share that out with everybody, because we know not everybody's going to be able to make the September 29th, but once we have that guidance fine-tuned a little bit for this year, we'll share it so that you can, if you have teachers who want to use STAR for goal setting for SPMs, we'll give you some advice for that. All right, we're almost done here. Upcoming training. We have STAR 101 and STAR 102 slide decks and recordings that we think are really, you should be utilizing these, especially if you have teachers who are new to STAR. So if you have teachers in your building who have never administered STAR before, or if they haven't analyzed data, you absolutely should have them at some point watch or read through the slide deck for STAR 101. It goes over the fundamental components of STAR, what's the purpose of it, what are the key metrics you get, how do you administer it, It goes through some differences between CBMs and CATs. So highly recommend that you make this STAR 101 available to your teachers, especially those who are new. STAR 102 goes a little deeper, and that's looking at a little bit more about when you have data from the test, what are some ways that you can create groups for the various reports in the Renaissance system. It also goes through skill checks. Skill checks are not required, but it's an additional way of testing students in the STAR platform that is able to focus in on a specific skill. It's 5 questions on a specific skill. We think the skill checks are a great resource, but we're not going to talk about them today. If you want to know more about them, STAR 102. Priscilla said hello earlier, but Priscilla, if you want to come off and say hi again, just so the people who joined late can see your face. You want to say there you go.
Yeah, hi everyone. Priscilla Mendez again. I am your Renaissance District Consultant. So if you ever need support with professional development, it can be one-on-one. I can join PLCs virtually or in person. I can do school-based professional development sessions. If you ever need support or just have specific questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I look forward to supporting you all.
Thanks, Priscilla. You can use this link here to request a session with Priscilla, and her link goes through different options of things she can offer, and you can also get her what her availability is. Priscilla also holds office hours where you'll see in these times, there's times where she's just going to pop on into a virtual platform like this and just sit and wait for anybody who's got questions. So keep that in mind if you're ever wanting to just be able to have some one-on-one support kind of randomly. You can always pop in and ask Priscilla some questions. Priscilla is an expert in the product and in the STAR system, so will be a great resource for you to use, whether it's a pre-planned visit or just an office hour pop in. So Priscilla is ready and waiting to help you. Other opportunities here, I mentioned that we're going to have that PD on the 29th. That's going to talk about analyzing fall STAR data and the SPM goal setting. We're going to share details about that soon. This is one of the district-wide PD days, so this will be an optional session for teachers or champions. We're going to have our next STAR champion PD on October 5th. Normally, we don't have them this close together, but we are going to do one in October because we want to be at that point, you'll all be done testing, and we want to talk about analyzing some STAR data. We'll go a little bit more in depth into STAR 102, and we're hopeful at that point we might also have some information on some product updates that we can share. And I teased some of those topics earlier, but hopefully at that point we'll have some more information. We'll send details soon about what exact time and signing up for it, but right now we're targeting the October 5th for the next STAR Champion PD. All right, so we have an attendance and survey form. If one of my team members can drop the link into the chat, this lets us know you're here, but the survey is going to let us know, was this session any good for you? Was it useful? And if there were things that you really wished we talked about that we didn't, let us know. We do read these. We do try to incorporate the feedback as we move along. And if we see there was an overwhelming, need for something that we didn't address, we'll put out an email or we'll record something that we'll share to make sure that you guys have what you need as we roll into the first STAR window. Put again all the resources we talked about earlier. Want to also let you know we introduced they had the PESO team who joined introduced themselves earlier, but not everyone was able to be here from the PESO team. If you didn't know who your PESO rep is, now you do. PESO, in case you're new, stands for Planning and Evidence-Based Supports Office. These representatives work with your teams on school improvement plans, but they also work with you on all sorts of data, not just STAR data, but data from all different types of systems and tests and things like that. They're super knowledgeable, they're super helpful, and if you have not taken advantage of your PESO representatives, you should reach out, meet them, and find out all the ways that they can help you. Additionally, if you need help, we talked earlier about using the STAR assessment email. please don't email just me or just Nina or just Faye or just Michelle or just Greg or just Priscilla. If you email STAR assessment, it goes to lots of people and it will increase your chance of getting a faster response. So please use that email. We talked about Priscilla. You can always reach out directly to Renaissance if you want by going to their support information here. And I really want to encourage you to use the help menu in STAR. It's really good. Like if you were in the middle of STAR system and you're looking at a report or you're on the record book or you're in the middle of it, looking at something in, I don't know, SmartStar or whatever. If you click in the help menu, it will take you to information specific to the page you're on in the application. And some help menus aren't great. STARS is. They really do, I think, do a good job of providing great resources. So if you're ever in need and while you're in the STAR system and you don't want to wait for somebody to help you, click on that little help icon and get some help. All right, so that is what we have for you today. Thanks so much for taking some time out on your first week back on a Friday before Labor Day to come and listen to me drone on about STAR stuff for a while. So I appreciate you being here. We are gonna I'm gonna let Nina do a little housekeeping in a second, and then we're gonna hang on for those people who have additional questions. But Nina, was there something that for the good of the group?
There are 4 questions that were in the chat. For folks that have to go, please feel free. But the 4 questions I thought might be for the good of the group.
So one sec, for those of you who are going, thank you again for being here. Good luck this school year, and we'll let you know when this recording is posted, and just wish you the best of luck. But hang on if you want to hear answers to these questions or you have other questions. So thanks, Nina. Go ahead.
Is it still true that if a student needs to do the Spanish, they still have to complete the English version for the Spanish to register?
To register. You don't, I'm not sure if I understand the question, but you don't, if you meant like, do you have to do the English one in order for the Spanish one to show up, or do you have to do the Spanish one in order for the English one to show up? No, they would both be available, but I'm not sure if I fully understand the question. I will tell you that, we tried to put for you way back in the beginning here, the expectations of for the dual language, the requirements for which ones they have to take in English and in Spanish. There's way more detailed guidance in this guidelines for multilingual learners. There's a whole section on dual language learners, but if I'm misunderstanding the question, if you're still in the group and you want to come off mute and let me know specifically what you're asking if I didn't answer it.
I didn't ask the question, but I'm thinking, will it count? Will it count as participation? Like if they do the Spanish, do they have to do the English for it to count for participation?
I think I know the question
Thanks,
here.
Sean, because I'm like, oh, I don't remember what the participation rules are like right now.
My understanding is at a certain point last year, I forget when, the participation business rules in CLIC reflect the guidelines from OMCP. So really the answer to your question is if you followed the guidelines from OMCP in that document, then yes, it will, well, depending on the guidelines, it will be determined whether it counts as participating or not.
Yes, Sean, I can confirm that. That is correct. So the participation rules now follow the OMCP guidelines.
So you would have to do both.
No. If you are a student who should only be taking the Spanish version will qualify as participation.
Right, got it. Yes.
So it depends on a number of factors, including like access level, date of entry in the country, like those all factor in that guideline.
Right. It is not the case that if you just take Spanish, you're automatically exempt from taking English.
But I guess how do you know if they're registered only for Spanish? Like, how do you know if a student only has to take Spanish?
Based on those guidelines. Also, Shauna was the person who asked it. I had to scroll back. I'm glad you're still here. Thank you.
So I would take a little bit of time to look through this document that we're scrolling through on the screen here. It's long, but it's thorough. If you feel like after reading through it, you don't have the answer to your question, then you can either reach out to STAR Assessment. or you can reach out to the multilingual team if you have one of the I'm totally blanking on what they have people in their office who are assigned to networks.
You're a multilingual manager.
Managers, thank you. I was just blanking on the name there. The multilingual managers that are assigned to your school can help as well. But so read through that, let us know if it still needs some more clarification, and we'll definitely get it for you. Nina, ready for the other ones?
Shauna, that link I just put in the chat, and it's also on slide 47. That is the guidelines for multilingual learners, just in case you wanted to look at it now. Sure thing. Yes, Jeff. Let me get back to
can I just ask a question that kind of goes along with that?
Sure.
Yes.
Is it possible to put on the multilingual guidelines sheet about if their participation counts based on the practice questions?
It will
not.
It will not in terms of, okay, as I said earlier, if you have students who are required to take a computer adaptive test and they cannot pass the practice test, and they legitimately can. It wasn't like they just click and they weren't even trying, but like they tried, they can't pass it. That counts as participation in terms of like, you've done your job, you offered the test to the student, they couldn't engage with it to get past it. So you don't need to force them to take to take the test, but it won't count in Click because the development rules haven't yet applied in Click where they're able to look at failed practice tests and count it as participating. That's coming. I've been saying it's coming for over a year, but it is coming. It's just taking a little longer than we thought. So for right now, failed practice tests don't count in Click for participation, but in your school level, like if you've tried and they made an honest effort and they can't get past it, then consider that student participated and move on, knowing that your actual participation rate in Click is going to be a little different than who actually participated. And that's where I was mentioning, like, hopefully your leadership team is aware of that. Your assistant soup can be made aware.
Yeah, so it was my question. And do assistant superintendents know that it's coming? Because our assistant soup pulls that information from Click, sends it to the principal sends it to us.
So we have certainly shared it with assistant soups, whether they know it or not. I cannot, it's we do have some new assistant soups this year. So they should know, but this to me, the most effective way to get this message across is going to be if the assistant soup is having a conversation with the principal and leadership team, and it's about participation, and this is an issue, your team should be able to be prepared with. I would say, hey, okay, our participation rate on Click was X, but we had this many students who failed the practice test and couldn't go on from there, and that is not yet calculated in Click. So our actual participation rate, like these 10 kids would have participated, and that would have put us over. If you are having, I'm sorry, go ahead, Kristen.
So then going along with that, in the past, for this exact issue, we have gotten the kids past the practice questions, right? And then they take the whole test. So I'm from Mayfair, we're over 50% ESOL. So our kids cannot pass the practice questions, right? That's the reality of the situation. So in the past, we have pushed them past it. So now is that data going to look different from year to year? Do we continue to do what we've been doing?
It would look different, obviously, if you don't push them past it just to get the participation check, right? For it is going to be different. This to me, and I know this, right? My answer is not always going to be one that you're gonna like, because doesn't change the questions that the assistant soups are asking, but the idea here is that the reality of what's happening in the building, it should trump what that participation number is in Click. And there is going to be certain schools like yours where that's a greater disparity because you have a lot of students who can't pass that practice test. And what should happen is that there's a conversation with adults that explains it. And why is our participation low? Well, here's why. And hopefully that be then the end of the conversation around the participation. And it might be a conversation around, well, how can we get more of these kids to pass the practice test? But if you feel like you are
I love that.
What was that? Okay.
I love that response. That's
Okay.
great.
Good. Hey,
You
if
need
you
to do
feel
that.
like you are having, and this is for anybody, where you feel like your leadership team or the assistant soup is not quite mirroring that message we just said, let us know. We're happy to intercede and try to make sure we're all on the same page with how is Click actually working versus the expectations. We're trying to get rid of this discrepancy so this all goes away, but we're just not there. We don't have a technical solution yet that's been implemented. So in the meantime, if there's confusion or clarification is needed, please let us know, and we're happy to have conversations with principals or assistant soups to close the gap here.
Yeah, chasing 100% participation scores is not in the educational best interest of students, particularly students who we know that they cannot pass the test. We're not learning anything new by forcing them to pass the test.
Yeah, thank you so much, Josh. Yeah, I'd rather you not force kids past it and to basically put up a sham, we took the test, but like they can't engage with it meaningfully at all. And why are we doing that? We're wasting your time, we're wasting students' time, we're giving us faulty information just for the sake of a participation number. That's not our goal, right? So hopefully all this helps. And I'm not going to repeat myself again. Other questions? Thanks. I know we're past time. Drop whenever you want, but if we're going to stay a little longer to keep answering questions for those of you who have it.
I have a few that were still from the chat.
Okay, Julia, I'll get to you. But go ahead, Nina.
This was in some grades. This is more of a concern. I didn't know if you wanted to talk about this. In some grades or schools, a majority or a high number of our students score in intervention. So will be many progress monitoring in the window for us. I feel like that's a common one that a lot of schools might be concerned about. I'm wondering if you have any response to that you want to share.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things. One, if you have if the majority of your students are intervention, I mean, might be more of a tier 1 problem than a problem that is going to be solved through intervention. So I'm going to just put out that blanket statement that if the majority of the building qualifies for needing intervention, then that might be something not best handled through intervention, but changing tier 1 instruction. That's I know it's going to be very specific to each school, so that I don't mean that to be a blanket statement that applies to all situations, but that's just in general, the idea here is that it could be a tier 1 problem versus a tier 2, tier 3 issue. Let's say though that you do have lots of kids who you're progress monitoring for, then I'm really kind of what I had said earlier in the presentation. It's okay if you start progress monitoring during the window. We're not anticipating it's going to be that much of an overlap unless your school knocks out all testing in like the first 2 weeks and you start intervention right away and you start progress monitoring, at another 2 weeks. So it's like within 4 weeks from the start of the window, you're already getting progress monitoring. Well, then, yeah, and in the second and third windows in particular, you're going to have kids progress monitoring while the window is still open. That's okay, right? Like I said, it's not going to change your participation, because if they're progress monitoring, that means that they've had taken the test initially, so they've participated, and they're only going to count for participation once. So that's fine. Could it impact your performance score a little bit? Yeah, if the kids are doing better on the progress monitoring test than they did on the first one, then it could make it a little higher. But we're not anticipating, number one, that there's going to be that dramatic of a gain in knowledge and performance from a student after one round of intervention, and one after the first round of progress monitoring. But even if it did, well, good, right? Like we're looking at performance, and if that's their performance during the window, well, great. If they're learning more, fantastic. And that's fine. So we don't think this will be an issue. It's okay. We don't want you to hold off on intervention. If you're ready for it and then do it, even if the window's still happening. Don't delay giving instruction to students and putting these things in place just because of the sake of the window. Okay.
Jeff, can I make a recommendation or two
Please.
about progress monitoring? Because
for it.
as somebody who supports the acceleration network,
Yeah.
we run into this problem pretty regularly.
Okay.
So some solutions that you can put in place, if you have a classroom full of 30 students and 20 of them are in need of progress monitoring, if we're talking about the younger grades, where CBMs are probably what's going to be used for progress monitoring, break them up into smaller groups. If you have 20 students, you do not need to test all 20 on the same day with the CBM when you're getting back in 2 weeks. Move them into alternating cycles so that at the end of week 2, you're testing 10 of those students. At the end of week 3, you're testing the other 10. The end of week 4, you're retesting the first 10. Similarly, they do not even need to all be tested on the same day. You could make that 5 and 5 and 5 and 5 by testing them on Wednesdays and Fridays, or on Mondays and Fridays by scaling your cycle correctly. Another thing that we've seen that provides tremendous benefit is consider if you're going to be using the CBMs for this, that if you have 2 people in the room for whatever reason, say you've got someone you're doing small group instruction and you have somebody who's helping with the classroom while you're breaking students into small groups, and this is the time you're going to be offering the CBMs, it's much more valuable for the classroom teacher or whoever's providing primary instruction to be the one administering the CBMs. They will immediately be able to see where the errors are occurring. Say it's an error in passage or reading, or an error in in phoneme segmentation. They'll get a better sense almost immediately, and they won't have to have someone translate that information to them, where all they know is that the student got a 17, but the expectation was to get a 54. They'll hear some of the errors. It can help them get at this faster. Now, if you're dealing with a higher grade where a large number of students are taking a computer adaptive test or another assessment, remember that the expectation is monthly, not bi-weekly in the same sort of way. So you have a little more time to plan, but you can sit a majority of your students because they'll need to be in front of an adaptive test. You can seat them at the same time, say in a computer lab or in a situation where everyone will have Chromebooks out. So remember that the purpose here is we're not trying to win a race with progress monitoring. We're actually trying to meet the educational needs of these students. Sometimes there is a benefit, just like I said, with the CBM cycle, with alternating off, because it will mean more individual attention is given to those students. Hopefully that was helpful.
Thanks, Josh. I appreciate it. God bless you. Somebody just sneezed there. So, Nina, other questions?
Yes, the person who asked this question, I think it's still here. This was for Gada. Yeah, she's still here. So I want to ask this one. If students in grades 4 and 5 do not, but Gada, tell me if this was already answered. You can interrupt me. If students in grades 4 and 5 do not pass the practice test for reading, should they take the early literacy just so we can have some type of data? I said yes, but I wondered if you also wanted to add anything to that, Jeff.
Yeah.
Or Gada, tell me if you no longer have that question also.
I know that you did speak about like giving grade 3 the early literacy just so we can have some type of data, but I wanted to clarify that also applied to grades 4 and 5.
It does. Yeah, you can absolutely give the early lit test to any student in any grade. If it's 3rd and up and they've tried the STAR reading, because that's right, we're saying it's required, they have to do STAR reading and STAR math. And they can't pass the practice questions, or they pass the practice questions but perform really poorly on it, and you feel like, hey, let's give a test that's going to be more their level and give us some more information to go on, then absolutely you can give the STAR early that test to them. Yeah, great. Other questions?
Yeah, Julie Schwartz had her hand up.
Perfect.
Julie,
Thanks.
are you still there? Go ahead.
Thanks for your patience, Julie.
No problem. It's quick, I think.
Okay.
I know that the probes haven't changed for the CBMs, but somebody mentioned when I asked that question that some of the teacher directions have changed. And I was wondering if that related to any of the CBMs we're giving, or if you meant just the ones that are going to show up, but we're not giving.
It does. We did put the updated ones in the folder, and I'm not remembering off the top of my head, but if you give me
I can look which 2 those are, because I have it in an email. I'll give you one
And
more.
it's just
Go
and
ahead.
just to clarify, because we made CBM binders for my teachers last year, and I'm trying to kill as few forests as possible. So it would just be the teacher directions that changed, but they could keep all the probes that they had from last year.
Yes, it was
correct.
just teacher directions and
Yeah, Nita, it's improved scoring instructions for expressive nonsense words and scoring instructions for receptive nonsense words are the two documents that have, yep.
Right here. So,
Awesome. Thank you so much.
yep. Other questions?
yeah, Zoe brought this up and I think she's still here. Zoe, yes, I wanted to mention this. So last year, some folks were told, she got this information from an SBTO and she thought this would be for the good of the group. Last year, folks were told that if a student got above 852 on the CAT, but then scored below 852 in green.
No, below green.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
It was from Mia. Thanks, Zoe.
Awesome. Thank you. Go ahead. Do you want to ask?
We were told that because we were having some discrepancies where kids were scoring like really high on the early literacy. Then we gave them the reading test and they scored yellow, sometimes blue, but often sometimes yellow. And we were told we should also then be re-giving them the early literacy test because of SGPs and I just want to make sure before I redo that I'm doing the right thing for this year.
So, it's not unexpected that a student might score lower or be in a lower performance level on STAR reading than they were in STAR early lit if they're just becoming an independent reader, right? So you do STAR early lit, you score the 852 or above, you move to STAR reading, which is now requiring independent reading, and the student might struggle a little bit more, and their score might dip in terms of their performance level, and that doesn't mean that you then have to go back and give them STAR early lit just for the sake of trying to look at SGP. I would it's that test, the STAR reading test is the one that is more appropriate for them at that point because they should be pushing to doing the independent reading, and it would give you information around hopefully where are they potentially struggling as an independent reader, or how are they doing in that sense. So you don't have to then go back and give. So let's say you did STAR early lit in the fall, they scored high enough that in the winter you want to give them STAR reading, and you do STAR reading in the winter, and they're in yellow versus green, right, or on watch or one of the other lower levels. You don't have to then in winter give STAR early lit again. The hope would be that by the spring, right, that they have become an even stronger reader and would rebound or show some growth in that area. So I think it's certainly up to you, and you can administer STAR early lit again after doing STAR reading, to do both, but that really would be only something I would do if you thought it was going to give you helpful information. I wouldn't do it just for the sake of, and I'm not saying you were doing this, but I wouldn't encourage somebody to just say, well, we want our scores to look better, so we're going to take more time to test, right? Like if we're not looking to over test or take more time away from instruction. We already know that, doing this, especially with CBMs, can take some time. So I would say if you feel like you're doing it in order to get some additional information that can inform your instruction and you have the time, go ahead. But if you're doing it because you're worried about trying to get a higher SGP or something like that, I wouldn't do it for that purpose, because the student is really progressing as we would want. Of they're an emerging reader, they might struggle a little bit as an independent reader, but they're going to continue to get better and better as the year goes on with that, and you would expect to see that growth continue to happen. Does that answer the question, Julie?
That totally does. And that's what I was hoping you would say. So thank you.
Great. Yes.
The only other thing I would ask about that is you just said in your answer that if they score an 852 in the fall on or above on the early literacy, that we could, in the winter, we could give them the star reading? Does that mean that if they score above an 852, we shouldn't go give them the star reading in math in the fall? That it's okay to,
You
we can
can
wait till-
wait. You can wait.
Okay, awesome.
And I would probably say, I would kind of use a judgment call on that. Like, if you're administering star like next week and your teachers really haven't had a chance to get to know these students too much and what their abilities are, and you're like, oh wow, I wasn't expecting this first grader to knock this test out of the park. Let me give them star reading and see how they're doing. Right? Like that would be a case I would do it if I'm trying to really establish like, well, how much does the student know? But you don't have to, right? You could say, great, all right, we know now for the winter, we're definitely moving to star reading for you. So you can do it, but you don't have to do it. Does that make sense?
That's perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate your guys' time.
Sure. Sophia, you had your hand up?
I did. Thank you so much. I was wondering, I know that last year we were allowed to have the autonomy or make the choice in regards to our emergent readers in K-2, in regards to the multiple measures that we have to do for reading and math. So if say a first grader is just learning letters, are we still expected to give them all of the CBMs and all of the math CBMs, or do teachers have the autonomy to say, okay, for this student, we're only going to measure letter recognition. And once he or she has mastered letter recognition, then we'll move on to administer the additional CBMs.
So the expectation is that you would be administering all of the measures that would be required for that grade in time. So in your example, like you have a kindergartner who you know they're still on letter naming. The expectation is that you would try to administer letter sounds, phoneme segmentation, receptive nonsense words. There's stuff built into those tests that you'd be able to stop it pretty early if the kids aren't succeeding, right? So it's not like if the students and I'm not remembering the exact criteria in each of these tests for when it stops, right? But it's built in that if the students are not successful with it and not doing well, you don't have to do the full measure. You'd be able to know pretty early and stop it.
Right.
Yeah.
For phoneme segmentation and nonsense words and letter sounds, it's usually after the fourth one is answered incorrectly, or 30 seconds or more has gone on. So just so I'm clear, the expectation is for teachers to still administer them, knowing that they're not able to do it.
Yes, and I know that's not the guidance you wanted to hear. Part of this
I'm just kind of
yeah.
thinking of how to word that to the teachers in the way that they won't throw things at me.
So one suggestion is to have a virtual meeting so that they can't throw things at you. But I would say that part of the reason for this requirement is because of how it's connected to the board goals and the leading indicators. And I know that is not going to be an answer that might prevent your teachers from wanting to throw things. But at least it gives you a place to point the reason why that the board is planning this year. I mean, they've been looking at it before, but they're going to be looking at each CBM's performance. So because I'm going to say typical, but I don't, that's not the right word. But I'll say, because I'm struggling to think of something better, more appropriate to define, because a typical kindergartner would be expected at that time to be able to have some knowledge or level of those skills. That's why the board wants to see, well, where are we? So even though my teachers might know that the students can't do it, we still want to have them try it to see what scores they do actually get. So when we're doing a high level analysis, when people are looking at it, they're able to get a better sense of what's happening across the district or across a school or across a grade. So again, might not be a popular answer with the teachers, but that would be that's a lot of the reason why.
And I'm assuming that goes for math as well, because
Yes.
our self-contained teachers, of course, are teaching ELA and math. So for one student, they're easily giving 8 to 10 measures when it comes to ELA and math for one student.
Yes.
I know, and I'm just, okay, thank you very much for answering. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you for having to be the messenger of that unpopular decision at your school. You can certainly have them watch this and then they can blame me. But yeah, so that's the answer. I'm sorry. I will also say that part of the reason, we know that the younger grades do have a lot more of the CBMs to do. And I meant to say this during the presentation and I forgot, but we would encourage you to start earlier in the window, knowing that they have a lot to get through. And as Josh was mentioning earlier, strategies for possibly, spreading it out to make it so, but obviously you're going to do what makes the most sense at your school, and maybe you want to just knock it out quickly, or maybe you do want to spread it out. So, all right. Other questions? I have a couple more minutes before the next meeting.
Someone, the person who asked this left, but I wanted to ask it anyway. I don't think I really fully understand the question, but what they asked, in case you do fully understand it, Jeff, is so the CBM, now the so part was probably based on something you said an hour ago, but the CBM recorded as the benchmark is the highest during the window. I didn't really understand that question, and then Sean chimed in and Greg did. Do you understand that question? Or I have the person's name, I can reach out and ask.
Nina, I think the question is basically that if a student takes the CBM multiple times during the testing window, which of the tests will be recorded as the score for the student, say in Click?
So if that is the question, if the same test is taken multiple times during the screening window, the Click logic rules are to take the highest score. So in most cases, we wouldn't expect CBMs to be administered multiple times during the window. Really, I think the only time that would happen where the same student is taking the same CBM in the same window would be what we talked about a couple times already, where if you have moved into intervention and progress monitoring still within the window, then you might be doing it. But in most cases, we don't want people retesting kids in CBM. So as we just said, there's already a lot of CBM testing that happens. So if they've taken it once, that's enough, unless you were now talking about progress monitoring. But yeah, if they take it more than one time in the window, we would take the higher score. Please don't administer tests to kids multiple times unless it's for progress monitoring, just to get higher scores, because we don't want to overtest. I'm sorry, I talked over somebody who started talking.
That was me. I have the person's name, so I'll email her this answer. Thanks, Josh and Jeff. Those are all of the questions that were in the chat.
Anybody else?
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Well, you hopefully know where to find us if you have additional questions, and thanks for those of you who hung on a little longer, and appreciate it. So enjoy the rest of your day. Have a nice long weekend. And that's it. Let me stop the recording.
Thank you all.
Thank you.